let me change my input. Okay. Good evening and welcome to the March 19th, 2015 meeting of the Planning Commission for the City of West Sacramento. Per normal, we will start this evening's meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'm going to ask Mr. Sternfelds to lead us this evening. Thank you. Anyone wishing to address the commission this evening should fill out a small form over there, their request to speak. They're about this big. And please hand it to the clerk, Katie, prior to the end of the staff report on the item. So prior to the part where it comes back to the commission. That way the paper can get up to me and we can call you up. First item on our agenda is presentations on by the public on matters not on the agenda, of which point I have none so far. So we will move to staff correspondence and communications. Mr. Tilley.
Yes, Commissioner Liebig, 2 items to note tonight. First of all, we soon will have a Planning Commission alternate member. So the first time we've had one. Her name is Andrea Lepore, and we will be bringing her to our next meeting to swear her in. And she will be need to be called upon in case of any commissioners cannot attend a regular meeting. And obviously, if any commissioners do know that they can't meet an upcoming meeting, please always let us know, as well as the chair, so that we can engage our alternate in that situation. And then secondly, some good news to report. City of West Sacramento was invited to submit a formal application for the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities AHSC grant program for Delta Lane and our Grand Gateway Transportation Improvement Project. You submitted a concept for that originally. This is a lot of the cap and trade money, and we were one of 147 others that were invited to submit formal proposals, seeking about $650 million more than what is available. But we will be submitting our formal application, because I believe it's due about mid-April shortly. And I don't know when we would find out about formal award of this, but this was very good news for us. And we do feel like we'll be very competitive on those 2 projects. That concludes our staff communications at this time.
Thank you. Next up on the agenda is disclosure of ex parte communications. At this time, planning commissioners should disclose any communications they've had with applicants with items on the agenda. All right, seeing head shaking, that's none. We'll move on to the consent agenda, consideration and approval of the minutes from the March 5th, 2015 meeting. Alex?
Mr. Chairman, I've already spoken to Katie about this. The last vote, entry number 4, my vote should be aye rather than abstain.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes, noting the edit from Commissioner Kelter.
Moved by Commissioner Austin,
Second?
seconded by Commissioner Kelter. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No abstentions? Thank you. Okay, this is moving on to the regular agenda. First item on the list is item number 2, public hearing regarding the proposed conditional use permit for an exception to maximum floor area ratio for a 63-room hotel at 3980 Lake Road. Kathy.
Good evening, Chairman Liebig and members of the Commission. The item before you tonight is a conditional use permit application for an exception to the floor area ratio for a hotel located in the Highway Service Commercial Zone. The hotel itself is a permitted use in the Highway Service Commercial Zone. However, the floor area ratio maximum in that zone is 0.40. The applicant's hotel proposal has a FAR of 0.71. And the floor area ratio is calculated by totaling square footage of all floors of the building divided by the square footage of the site where the building is located on. The applicant is proposing to construct a 63-room hotel. The hotel will be approximately 37,200 square feet in size. The site the project is located on is 1.23 acres and is located on Lake Road, south of Interstate 80, east of Enterprise Boulevard. In June of 2008, the Planning Commission approved a use permit for a La Quinta on this same site. And actually, that project was proposed by the same ownership group. The hotel was not constructed at that time, mainly due to economic conditions in that period of time. Both the previous project and current project had the same number of rooms, same amount of square footage, and the same floor area ratio. Due to the fact this project is located south of I-80, there were some concerns from staff regarding noise. Staff did request the applicant do a noise assessment study, and Ballard Acoustical Consultants did prepare said study and submitted it in February. The noise assessment did indicate that the hotel rooms facing the freeway side could have interior decibels greater than 45, which is the maximum in our noise ordinance. The amount of reduction that needed depended upon which floor, but ranged from 28 to 31 decibels of traffic noise reduction. The noise consultant did submit suggestions on how that could be achieved, mainly by choosing different types of windows, along with the wall-mounted air conditioning systems that would get the interior noise levels down to below 45 decibels. And we did put those in our conditions of approval. Staff is recommending approval of this project, as all findings can be made in favor. Staff is requesting that the Planning Commission conduct the public hearing and approve the recommended actions as shown in the staff report. The project applicant is here in the audience and is available to answer any questions you may have. This concludes my presentation. I can answer any questions now or after you've heard from the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. You indicated that the applicant is here to answer questions. Is there a presentation, or is it just available for questions?
I am actually not sure if he has a formal presentation, but he is definitely here.
Didn't mean to put you on the spot like that. You might need to make sure your microphone is on.
Pardon me?
Good evening, Chairman Lieberman and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Ken Fong. Too close. My name is Ken Fong with TKF and Associate Architects. We were the original architect a few years ago when we got it approved, and we're back before you again with the new franchise. And my client that originally did the original La Quinta Hotel, he's here to answer any questions. And also I have the franchise representative here to answer any questions that you may have on the hotel. And basically, we reviewed the conditions of approval, and we agreed to all the conditions. I think the project, we designed a real nice project on a piece of land that is, my client bought from Caltrans, their excess property, and we were able to make this thing work and able to do a hotel. And we think we got a good presence up from the freeway with the hotel, and we look forward to getting your comments, and we're ready to start this project. If we get approval tonight, we're ready to go. Our drawings are we've done our drawings since 2008, and we're prepared to start construction as soon as we consummate our final approvals and the loan.
Okay, with that then, I will go ahead and open the public hearing, and I'm going to leave it open just in case any of the commissioners have any questions
Okay.
for your
Okay,
engineers
so
or design.
we're here to answer any of the questions.
All right, thank you so much.
Okay.
Are there any questions of the applicant or of staff? Any discussion? I'll look to my left. Alex?
Just one question about trees. The light's on.
It is. Is it a question to staff or is it a question of staff or
I
the
think it's a
applicant?
question to the applicant.
Seem to be having microphone problems, so we'll just speak up.
Okay.
All right, could the applicant come forward to talk about trees?
And I guess my question has to do,
Sorry, we're having a little difficult hearing you from the audience.
When you start, can you start by stating your name?
Pardon me?
Can you start by stating your name?
My name is Ken Fong.
Ken Fong, thank you.
Yeah.
Alex, go ahead.
a question about trees. In the sketches, and this may be standard procedure and I'm not aware of it, but in the sketches, are the trees shown at maturity? Is that the
Oh, you mean the size?
Uh-huh.
Basically, the size, if you show a 5-gallon or a 15-gallon, you're going to see a little pin dot there. So it's kind of full-grown,
It is, okay.
yeah.
The reason I ask is that the exposure is south and west largely, and it would seem advantageous, if it's feasible, to add trees that are high enough and dense enough to actually shade the building and reduce energy costs.
I mean, actually shade the building.
Uh-huh. Is that feasible at all?
Well, I think we can, I'll ask my, landscaper to, they have their criteria at a certain period of time that's supposed to cover, 50% of the parking area, so we have those requirements that they, but I don't know about shading the building, how much of that, actually shade the building. But basically, they designed it to shade the parking lot, not shading the building itself.
Well, just an idea.
Yeah.
Other comments on this side? No? Charlie, I know you have some.
I actually have a couple of questions here, and I guess I was looking at your drawings and what he was just talking about on the parking area. I don't see any trees out there in the parking area at all. And I thought, Kathy, I thought that we had something that they had to put trees and have shade out in the parking area. And I'm looking at drawings here and I see maybe trees up by the building and stuff, but there's nothing out in the parking lot. I'm looking at this one in particular.
Oh.
I don't know what
Oh,
that is.
that's just a rendering. He wasn't designing the trees on the rendering.
Yeah, so I mean, I see no trees at
Yeah,
all in the
the
parking
trees
lot.
are shown on the landscape plan, which is,
They will have to adhere to our landscape guidelines,
Right,
which
which-
do
Yeah.
require shade
He
trees in the
mentioned it,
parking lot.
but I didn't see it, and that's why I was just making sure that we were gonna do that. And since we know we're gonna do that,
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. The other one is, if I'm looking at attachment 2, which is the first big drawing you pull out,
Thank you.
I'll try to make it easy. There you go. Attachment 2, number 1, are there any setbacks required at all for the hotel? I'm looking on the left side, it looks like they have like garbage bins and stuff that are right on the property line itself. And I don't know what the little lines are going up there, but, I mean, we look like we're right on the property line or a foot off of it.
well, our building has to be a minimum 5 feet
Well, the
away from
building looks like it's 8 feet away from the thing, but what about the stuff on the left? Is that your garbage containers and stuff like that? I don't know what it is.
Yeah,
over there.
that's our,
That's right on the property line.
yeah, we can, on commercial, we can build right up to the property line.
Yeah, the garbage containers are in a concrete enclosure, which is, tantamount to a wall, which would commonly be on the property line.
Is that what we're looking on the left side of the building, that all that stuff's gonna be,
The garbage
Garbage
enclosure
container?
appears to actually be on the right-hand side of the building.
so what's on the left-hand side then, David? You see
That's-
what I'm looking at?
Yeah, well, there's the landscape planner. Is that your,
I'm still on attachment 2.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm looking on,
that hashed area, Ken?
I'm looking on sheet A, our site plan, and our trash enclosure is away from the property line.
Okay, so that's not the traffic, so
Yeah.
what's on the left side of this number 2?
Yeah, our trash enclosure's on the right side.
Okay, so
Yeah.
what's on the left side?
On the left side is just parking spaces.
That's not what it shows here. It shows all those little diagonal lines. and
Oh,
then it
that's just the
shows-
loading, we just shaded the area, just show it, the loading area.
Okay, what's to the left of that?
That's
It looks like something,
parking
Compact parking
spaces,
spaces.
parking spaces.
It took my eyes some straining, but I got it. They're compact, they're compact parking spaces with a drive
oh,
aisle.
so that little tiny drive aisle will get you to those 2 parking spots.
You're right.
Okay, I thought that was
Well,
some sort of a
we
building.
needed a long loading area, so it was.
But
we
again,
thought it was
we're
a
back to, can we put the parking spaces right on the property line then? Is that okay?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And then my last comment, and I have to tell you that I'm tickled to death you guys are bringing the building to town. I just want to make sure we're doing what we're supposed to. And when he talked about trees on the, facing the freeway.
Yeah.
I think your freeway, the part that's visible from the freeway should be almost as attractive as the front of your building. And we do that in many occasions here in West Sac, and we've did it with Walmart and IKEA, and they actually had to paint and draw stuff on the back of their buildings that face the railroad tracks. And sounds silly, but people go, wow, how nice is that to look at something besides just a barren building? And I think our landscaping and stuff on that side has to be as nice as it is in the front, so that it attracts people to your location.
Yeah, well, our backside of our building is actually fronting the freeway, so we tried to make the back of the building as nice as our front.
Yeah.
We wanted appealing so they could be seen from the
It's just
freeway.
hard to tell in the drawings how it is, but I'm making my comment that.
We tried to give you
I know.
a few additional renderings there for you to try to,
And I think it is in some, and in others, I go, boy, it could use a couple more trees or something
yeah.
in there. It looks a little
Well,
bare.
unfortunate, the person doing the rendering, he didn't show all the landscaping, he was just showing the building.
Those are my comments, Russ. Thank you.
Andrew?
Actually, I have a question for staff, and it's actually in regards to the Caltrans property. Looking at the aerial of the building parcel and the Caltrans parcel next door, it looks like that parcel's shape and size may be indicative of a future entrance or exit ramp, just by the way it's shaped in location to the freeway. And so I'm wondering if there's been any conversations with Caltrans, or if there's any plans to change that roadway on-ramp, off-ramp structure, only in thinking about how that might impact the noise impacts to the building.
The environmental document was forwarded to Caltrans for comment, and that is usually the point if they have any heartburn about the issue, that we will hear from them. And they submitted no comments whatsoever on the project.
Yeah, there was some work done on Enterprise Boulevard, not too many years ago, and there isn't any plans for that interchange, short term. I think long term, we will definitely need to make some improvements over there, but, and at that time, those improvements come, Caltrans will need to take into account that there is this quasi-residential facility there and their environmental analysis at that time.
Can I comment on the back of, when my client purchased the property from Caltrans, we were working on agreement during our first initial hotel with the La Quinta. We were we're trying to get an agreement to landscape some of the back area along their whole back part of their site. Because basically, Caltrans not going to do anything with that piece of property, you know, back there, except, you know, we want to make it look nice, so we want to do some more landscaping. So we're prepared to work with Caltrans on trying to get landscaping put back there. So that'll help adding additional landscaping. They were willing to work with us back, you know, initially when we started the project.
Great. No, I think my concern was just thinking forward 10 or 15 years as this area grows
Yeah.
and there's a need for an on-ramp coming that doesn't cross traffic onto the highway, that there might be an on-ramp built in very close proximity to this hotel. And so I just want to be thoughtful that we are taking that into account at this point, if possible.
Good catch. Martha?
As far as public transportation, to staff, what form of public transportation is available in the vicinity at this time?
I believe Yola Bus does have some commute hour runs out into this, general area because it's a large employment center. Is it the 240 bus? Don't quote me on which route it is. But it is not extensive, I can tell you that, but it is geared toward the employers in that area.
There is one on the opposite side of the freeway there as well. You just go around the freeway, there's one right there.
Okay, good. So at this point in time, do you foresee any need to add any shelters or anything to be included in the development of this particular area?
Yeah, I don't know that there's any bus service right actually on Lake Road. It's likely on Enterprise. And so I wouldn't foresee the need for those type of improvements on this property.
Thank you.
End of the questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
At this time, I will close the public hearing.
Okay, thank you.
And,
Chair
back-
Liebig,
Yes.
I don't believe that you actually asked if there's any public comments yet.
I have no requests to
Okay.
speak.
Thank you.
Usually that's how I know.
Okay, thank you.
Given that there are no other comments, public hearing is closed. No other comments. Just mine. I think this is a good-looking project, and as Charlie pointed out, it's a large building for this site. We're voting to increase the floor area ratio, and of course, we would like it to look good, especially since it's right against the freeway as you're coming into the city. So we see the renderings, but given Charlie's comments and concerns, and actually I have the same concerns, I'd like to just direct or ask staff to take extra care in the design review when they pull the building permit to ensure that the actual designs look like the renderings, like what we're seeing, or conform to our desire that it's not a big wall backed up to the freeway. So with that, I will look for a motion.
Well, Chair Liebig, a couple months ago, we entertained a use permit in the Pioneer Bluffs area, and just because previous commissions had approved it does not necessarily mean that we're going to approve it. In this particular instance, I see that there hasn't been significant changes to this particular area and this particular project, even over the last almost 7 years. And taking into account what my commissioners have said, I move to approve staff recommendation, including the chair's comments to staff regarding the design review.
Moved,
I'll
I
second
think,
the
by Commissioner Austin, and seconded by Mr. Moore. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, passes. Thank you. Appeal process, Mr. Tilley?
Yes, thank you for reminding me. Any interested party may appeal the decision of the Planning Commission in this matter to the City Council by filing a written appeal with the city clerk within 15 days of tonight's action, and that appeal must be accompanied by the appropriate filing fee.
Thank you. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is presentation and discussion regarding alterations to landscape planter strips in the public right-of-way. And this will be given by Mr. Hardy.
Chair, good evening, Commission. Tonight before you is a presentation workshop regarding alterations to planter strips in the public right-of-way. Currently, in the Southport design guidelines, where majority of the requests are coming from, requires sidewalks be separated and landscaping planters in between the curb and the sidewalk. Over this last several years, there have been numerous requests by homeowners to amend this area by altering, putting in either other types of landscaping other than turf or some kind of hardscape. In February this year, Mr. Talon came into City Hall requesting to do that again. He has also received a permit previously to do some alterations to his lot, mainly for access for his RV. And he installed some honeycomb down so he could get his RV back behind the fence, which is required by the ordinance as well. The planter strip that he has an encroachment permit approved to drive over, the honeycomb is still not working because it is too muddy. We actually went out on site on the 12th of February, and you can see it's still moist and see that there's actually still a muddy area there. In discussions with them, we decided amongst ourselves, Wendy and Patty in engineering, who are here also, we started developing some guidelines to allow homeowners to potentially alter the area. So it is somewhat of a problem out there in certain locations. I met specifically at City Hall with Mr. Talon as well to discuss his specific concerns and aspirations for that area. Most of his issues that he was concerned about have been met. We met actually yesterday with Mark Collier, the city engineer. His main issue for his RV was access was rectified with that discussion with staff. Part of the analysis we came up with, we need to keep cognizant of is it is a public landscape strip. There are street utilities, street trees that are city trees. There are utilities that run through the area. But at the same time, if you're stepping out of your car or you happen to ride your bike into the planter strip area, you might get a little muddy or sink in a little bit. And that's only in certain areas, mainly in this shaded area in the town. I see it worse than the sunny side. So we've come up with a process through the encroachment permit that they can submit plans. There is a small minimal fee to review that. Attached to the report are the guidelines that staff devised that take into account not only design guidelines for Southport, development engineering, parks, public works, anybody that would have any part of maintenance as well. So the standards that are attached, mainly minimal amount of hardscape, 3-foot area wide, 5 feet away from the trees. So city personnel can maintain the tree without destroying all their improvements into that area. Pretty much that concludes my report. I do have, in closing, we have developed also a list of plants that would be workable in the landscape area that would comply with the regulations we're proposing. We also, Patty contacted Home Depot and Lowe's to verify that these planters, shrubs and bushes can be locally purchased. We're not recommending something you can't even get here. And we have not heard back as of yet on that, and we can amend these as needed.
Thank you, Justin. This is a discussion session. This is not a formal workshop or a hearing, but I will go ahead and open up the public comment. I don't have any requests to speak, so if you have a request to speak, please fill out the form and get it to Katie, and she'll pass it to me. Comments from the commission? I'll look to the, Parveen, thanks. I'll start with Parveen.
Okay, my first question, and I think we went over this after Mr. Talon had made his presentation during our last meeting. I understand that there are already individuals that don't obtain a permit and go ahead and make these alterations. What is the citation for that? Are they fined, or do we have to reverse the modifications? What is essentially the punishment if they don't have a permit and they go ahead and make modifications?
Well, technically, they can be cited by code enforcement for doing those improvements in the right-of-way, without an encroachment permit. And I think that's an important underlying theme here, is we are talking about property that, although it is sort of treated as someone's front yard, it is still within the public right-of-way. And so there have been a handful of people that have done this around town. I've certainly seen a few that aren't just turf, out there. It's perhaps not the most egregious, violation that's out there in the world. But any of that work that's in that right-of-way, it can be cited by code enforcement if it does warrant that level.
So is it just a citation, or would they be required to pay the permit fees, or would they, if it was something that was in violation? Here there are parameters that you're proposing, and I do want to say that I believe Steffi did a great job on this proposal. It was very detailed, I do appreciate that. But my concern is that when modifications have already been made, and here we're trying to get a step ahead so people will come and will encourage permits and people will follow the parameters. But if a modification has been made or will be made in the future, and it's not within these parameters, it's hardscape that has not been approved. Are we then asking homeowners to reverse what they've done?
That's entirely possible, absolutely. If they have done work out there that is problematic and is outside these parameters, it's quite possible that the remedy may be to bring it into compliance with, these formal guidelines.
Okay, and then my concern is also with the hardscape generally. I feel that when you're driving down a street in Southport, the aesthetic is that they're tree-lined streets and there's greenery, there's plants. I mean, whether they're plants or grass, there is just greenery. And I feel like when we get into hardscape, one person can have a blue and white brickwork, and then the next person can have red brickwork, and I feel like we really lose that feeling, that continuity in that neighborhood. So I just had some concerns with hardscape in general. I haven't actually looked at all the list of the plants you had proposed, but I'm just more inclined to lean towards plants as the alternative to grass for lower maintenance and less watering. But those are my comments for now.
Thank you, Ms. Tumber. Bernadette, did you have any? Okay. Alex?
This has been puzzling me since we had testimony last meeting. We're in the middle of a drought. Where's all this water coming from?
Good point.
Do we know?
If you'd like, the homeowners, or the home front yard is typically around a foot higher. And so all the water that is watered there will eventually migrate down into the planter strip underneath the sidewalk. The sidewalk itself, or the planter strip itself, has irrigation in it as well. And so if one isn't cognizant of the amount of time that they run their sprinklers or turn them off during the minimal time we actually get rain anymore, it seems like the water will just continue to collect there and has no outlet. So unless you have a curb cut and allow it to escape down the street, the water keeps collecting there. So the key would be to reduce one's water usage up closer to the house so it doesn't trickle down, and also make sure that the irrigation in the planter strip is functional, isn't leaking and watering more than it needs to. So there's a fact of maintenance, but one, and two, you have the migration of water that's going to continue to perk down into this area. And in the areas that gets minimal amount of sun, especially during the wintertime, is the larger of the problem. One side of the street might be fine, and the other side of the street seems to have more of a problem.
Okay. Any comments on this side?
Okay, so I happen to have the same question that's dealing with, how do we have something that is so muddy? No offense, you can't get your RV to the top of the thing because it's so muddy when we're in a drought. So why was this thing so muddy up on top of his property?
It was only in the landscape planter area. He put the honeycomb mesh
We're only
down.
talking about there.
Huh?
The top of his property was fine.
Correct.
So did you see, is his bottom area not letting the water out? Is there a problem with that?
Yeah, the water, the planter strip area sort of acts as a dam.
Could, but you said that we have drains for that or irrigation for that.
There's no drain outlet for it unless you did a curb cut to allow the water to escape out. Otherwise, it collects there, so reducing the amount of water usage you do to your landscaping would be really
So why
the
wouldn't
key.
we do curb cuts rather than put in multicolored different bricks up and down the area? Why wouldn't you just allow them to put a curb cut in?
That hasn't been something that has been established in the Southport area. Only along West Cap have I seen that type of environment established. And there's probably a maintenance, a cost. You have siltration that would get into the curb that you would have to be taken care of, so you didn't have silt running down the curb
I don't know, that'd be
So-
wasting water.
without designing it correctly.
I mean, it just seems, and no offense, I mean, I don't want to step out and step into mud either. So, I mean, I don't want that. And if we can eliminate that, I'd love to do it. But I mean, I'm just going, there was a whole purpose behind doing that, which was to maintain the atmosphere out there of it being a small community and you could walk around and it was just, that's what we tried to create out there. And what you're gonna do is let somebody put cement in there instead of grass. And I'm not sure that I'm buying into that part of it. You know, I like the idea of grass being out there and something, I don't like the idea of mud, but I mean, there's alternatives to the mud situation. You just said that. So, and we haven't looked into any of that.
I just wanted to clarify, we're not advocating to or permitting to pave the entire planter strip over, only a 3-foot wide strip. 3 foot wide, it could be cobbles, it could be pavers, it could be, brick. As Mr. Talon mentioned, a lot of the people that he properties he looked at in Southern California were utilizing the same type of stone material on the house as in the landscape strip. So we weren't advocating, because you're still going to have a drainage problem. Even if you cap it all with cement, water's still got to
The
go
water's still
somewhere.
gonna run off.
So that doesn't rectify your moisture problem. Well, we weren't even advocating to do that because you have city utilities that are in there that need to be accessed. So you couldn't cover those up with hardscape anyway. And that's part of why we have the application plans need to be submitted so we can review them to verify you're not covering up where we would need to get to.
But you are somewhat if you're gonna put in the cobblestone and stuff like that, right? Or you're just assuming it's easy to take out?
Part of the review process would be to verify that they're not in a location where those utilities would be situated.
And I'm not opposed to it because like I said, I don't wanna step off and step into mud either. And I can understand if we have a problem, but I think we need to look at the other alternatives and one being making a curb cut. What is the effect, you'd have to get with people a lot smarter than I am to see what the effect of a curb cut would be. That may eliminate your whole problem. May not, but it sounds possible. So, before I want to say that I think every other house out there can have cement and rocks and stuff in that little curb area, I'd like to see that we've looked at every alternative possible before we do that. And you could be right that if you make the curb cut, you're gonna have too much other stuff going down the drain that we don't want. But you may have to talk to somebody at Public Works or smarter than I am.
We did discuss that. They were apprehensive about it, and it isn't a policy that they've,
Yeah, but if they've allowed it on West Capitol, they might be able to allow it out there. I just think it's something that we need to talk about before we make this final decision that it's okay to go ahead and cement it in.
Again, this is an open discussion.
That's all-
We're actually
that's
not
all I was
making
trying
any
to do.
decision whatsoever. We're just making recommendations, so. Andrew, do you have any comments? No? Vice Chair?
I appreciate all the research you've done and provided us with the background on this problem we have among our residents and what's going on in trying to address it, and the guidance I think the guidance you are providing for those that are seeking to get an encroachment permit it would be helpful, including whether they're considering, what type of pavement or, pavers, whatever they're thinking of putting out there. If there could be some more guidance on the part of the city to make sure that there's some consistency, if, as far as the aesthetic appearance in the neighborhood. Commissioner Tumber, I think has a valid point. If for other neighbors, they want to be able to, possibly sell their home and have a good appearance. So if there could be some guidance on that, and, that you would have that oversight included, I think that would be helpful for me to feel comfortable as this moves forward.
Thank you, staff. This document shows that you've definitely worked with the homeowners and have thought this through, and I appreciate all the detail that you've put into this. I do want to point out that we've been adding bioswales to other areas of the city in some of these, not necessarily small areas like a planter strip, but we are seeing the bioswales go in the Bridge District, and that is something that I appreciate it being considered here, and I think it's a consistent approach with other areas of the city. It seems that we're a little hung up on the hardscape, even though it might be 3 feet, but to make sure we have a consistent approach, maybe staff wants to think through the hardscape just a bit more. Regarding the watering, I just want to point out this. Some of our lots, we live along the river, and there's deposition, and you have different soil types. And when you get down to the street, the city has often graded that area down. And where I live, that is solid clay. As you move up, we have very sandy soil. What happens is, as you water the lawn, the water goes through the lawn, hits the clay, and rolls down, and we have a wetland at the sidewalk where our grass is dying at the top. So we have overcome this by ripping out all the lawn. And that's why I also like this, is because it gives an alternative to grass. And especially during the times we're in, I think one way of alleviating the overwatering is to reduce the need to water, and you put in more xeric-liking plants. And that has solved our wetland problem. That said, we did have to rip out the entire lawn, so I would encourage plants over lawns. I'm not in favor of the curb cuts, because that is I think that shows excessive watering, and we need to actually manage better that whole part of it. I think that, you know what, Justin, I had one more comment. There's a $500 deposit to do this work. I hesitated on this one a couple times. Is this perhaps cost prohibitive and maybe would prevent individuals from wanting to permit their work? And the question would be, is there an alternative?
I would like Wendy from engineering to speak on this.
As Wendy is walking up, so I would probably hesitate giving the city $500 just to work on a landscape strip. Does the city often take a credit card just to have on file as a deposit?
The city could take a credit card for their deposit. Just to let you know, that deposit is refundable once the work is completed. But we would take a credit card. We would actually cash the $500 and wait until the permit is finalized in order to do a purchase order to send back that money, though. We typically do not just hold a check or, hold a credit card number. We will actually cash the
Process it.
$500, right?
I see. It is a bit of money. I'm not sure what the other commissioners think about that.
Can you explain why $500 was the number?
$500 is the minimum encroachment deposit within the municipal code.
Can I also speak to the timing of that? Because generally, when you have an encroachment permit, it's the same thing. You're going to be out $500, particularly for the work to be done. It could be months. So,
could be.
To be out $500, even to be, a homeowner is, it's a fair amount of money. So I think that Commissioner Liebig brings up a good point that maybe there's a way to do something where, I like, a card approach. I don't know if the city has the sophistication to do something like hotels do where they block off a portion, but I imagine that you don't. But it's something to look into, and I appreciate that you bring up that point.
Okay. If there are no other comments, I will go ahead and close the public comment period. And staff, do you have everything you need from us on this one?
Yes, we will be taking this to the new Environment and Utilities Commission next month, since it has some relationship back to stormwater. And once we have their input coupled with yours, we likely would proceed on this item. I did not hear any commissioners requesting to see this item again. So if that's the case, then we will proceed along that course.
I think I would trust staff's opinion after taking comment. I'm seeing head nods, so I'm going to go with that.
All right, thank you.
Okay, moving on to item number 4. It's a public workshop on the General Plan 2035 Draft Mobility and Economic Development Elements. And this is yours again, Mr. Tilley.
Yes, thank you very much. As part of our ongoing efforts to complete our General Plan 2035 efforts, I've been trying to seek as much commission and council input on the draft policy elements of General Plan as possible. And so tonight we're here with 2 elements that we sort of bundled together previously. We had taken them before the former EDAC Commission and other commissions before. And so tonight is the Planning Commission's turn to provide some input on our draft mobility element, which is sort of the new parlance for what's always been known as the circulation element. And then also a new element that we will have in our general plan that we currently do not have right now, which is an element dedicated solely to economic development activities. So I begin by going over the mobility element. The term mobility is not just the sort of, term of art these days. It's really meant to capture mobility in the entirety of that sense, all modes. Many circulation elements, historically have focused primarily on vehicles and a little bit on buses, and you're pretty much, done. In this era, especially in the post SB 375 era, all modes of travel need to be accounted for and considered. And so our mobility element has been crafted with that as a primary underlying theme throughout the various goals that are in here, is addressing all modes of travel. And an important subset of that is the notion of complete streets. Complete streets are ones that are set up that from the get-go that accommodate all modes well. Bikes, pedestrians, transit, vehicles, and all other modes. This is something that, something we have obviously been striving to get towards, but now we're formalizing that in our policy element about what we desire as complete streets. And this is also an important part of our overall SB 375, compliance goals. So we have this document is set up to really address the multimodal nature of what we're looking for in our community, which again is not a new thing for us. We're very, very multimodal around here. We want to maintain going in that direction. Also, the complete streets notion, as I mentioned, is a very important aspect of some of our objectives. And we also want to get into efficiency of movement, particularly as that relates back to emissions, not only for criteria pollutants, but also greenhouse gases. So we're striving to maintain certain goals in our communities, thinking about certain on-traffic levels of service, but also trying to maintain flexibility in that regard as well, in that vehicles is not the be-all, end-all. We have to be very cognizant of the trade-offs sometimes that come between vehicles and bikes and pedestrians, and when you're talking about roadway improvements. We will have, as always, our circulation diagram that will, obviously indicate our various roadway classifications throughout our community. That will look largely very similar to what we have always had, because our roadway network, for the most part, is almost, fully established at this point, with the exception of Village Parkway, which would need to be connected. We remain having strong goals in the area of public transportation. The city puts almost all of its TDA money back into Yola Bus for our transit services in our community. And as well as what we're, as the commission should be very familiar with, is our efforts to pursue the streetcar system. We have a significant goals when it comes to bicycles. I know the mayor has articulated many times how we're striving to achieve platinum level on bicycles in our community. And bicycles are an important part of our mobility system, not only for recreation, but for moving back and forth between schools and employment. And moving into, now we're at the next goal is all related to pedestrians and walking. This is an important goal on many levels, not only for pedestrian safety. It relates back to our crime prevention through environmental design goals. People out walking, they see things, and that's good in the neighborhoods. We want people out, and that's also, good from which we'll bring at one of our subsequent meetings, going to our healthy communities objectives. Parking remains an important aspect in our community, especially as we urbanize. Parking can become a very important resource, and we want to make sure we're managing parking well to make sure that we're getting the most out of any parking that is provided, either on the street or in private lots. And we want to be looking at parking really as a resource that we can be managing as we move into a more urbanized format in many parts of our community. Parking can't just be done with giant parking lots like it has been done historically. It needs to be done in a much more calculated and intelligent manner to get the most out of it and to encourage, good habits in that regard. And we want to maintain our objectives for TDM, which is a acronym for Transportation Demand Management. This is a way where we try to reduce vehicle trips, particularly from high employment sites. This is something we have been doing all along. We're preparing transportation management plans for large employers such as CalSTRS. And of course, we maintain a very large, industrial base in our community that is not going away. So goods movement is very important for us, both trucking and rail, and also marine from the port. Remain very important parts of our overall system here. So I encourage the commissioners to consider these policies. They are broad, and they are that way intentionally. This really sets up sort of our broad goals on a long-term basis, throughout our community. And then the companion piece to this is actually how we implement many of these goals. Many of them will result in zoning ordinance changes, updates to our specific plans, improvements in our standard specifications to ensure that all streets can accommodate bicycles, bike lanes, sidewalks. Many of our streets right now don't even require sidewalks on them in this era. And that's something that's going to have to change. So tonight I'd like to perhaps seek input on the mobility element from the commission, and then we can pick up with the economic development element after that, if that would please the commission. Sort of go one at a time.
Thank you, David. I think we can definitely accommodate that. I did want to note that I think the mobility element provides for a better balance of transit options and reduces our dependence on automobile traffic, and I'm all in favor of that. So at this time, it is a public workshop, so I will open the public comment period, although I do not have any requests to speak at this time. So I will leave this open, and I'll have the vice chair remind me to close it later. Okay, so focusing on the mobility element, I've started with this time every time. I'm going to start on my right this time. Mr. Moore, do you have any comments?
Well, first off, David, I think this is a dynamite document. I mean, I don't know how, if you wrote the whole thing, you get kudos for this.
Well, I appreciate you thinking I may have. This has had many people providing a lot of input on it over many years.
Yeah, but
get here.
it really touches almost every element that I can think we've ever talked about in our life of being a city here. And it does a pretty good job of trying to take care of all those elements. I guess in the very beginning, I was kind of just curious, and I don't see it, or it's not spelled out like I'm reading it. We had a transportation hub out here in front where our buses were gonna be. This was our hub. Is this also the hub for the streetcar, should we get it?
The terminal station for the streetcar would be right out in front of City Hall and would integrate with the transit center that's across the street.
Okay, did I miss that? Is it in here that we're talking that way about the hub?
Yeah, there is one policy in here, it's policy M-1.10, that does talk about how we would maintain a multimodal transportation center, and
That's where I thought it was too, and that's where I had
essentially
it
is
marked.
across the
but
street.
But it's not, I just didn't know if you needed to elaborate that if we were gonna have the streetcar, that it would be, that would be the hub there. I don't know how big of an area that would require,
Yeah, the hub concept is more about where you have various, bus lines and other things that sort of intersect, and it's a great transfer point. The streetcar is a more, at least for the initial run, is a more linear, line where it will come here and interface with those buses. It's part of the overall hub.
Right.
But it isn't a hub in and of itself.
Okay, and I just was saying I didn't quite read that part. My only other comment, and this is strictly a comment for you, and it's dealing with the mobility part, but it's way back towards the back. It's in the M7.5. It says reduce minimum parking standards. Okay? My comment is, we have our very first project going in there by Rayleigh Field where we've had the homes built. Okay? And I know that we're planning on commercial being around and people going there. And I've noticed that we've started to let people live in those homes down there.
Yes.
And almost every single parking spot on the street is taken at night. So they're not parking, and I don't know if that's because it's not quite ready for them to park inside, but, we talked before that when these projects started, we needed to watch what was going on a little bit, because we would kill commercial and everything if every parking space is taken by people that are living there.
Yeah, and that's actually, something we are monitoring. Many of those folks have basically, just moved in over the last, couple of months.
I totally agree.
And so we are taking advantage of the available on-street parking in the very, early days, knowing that some commercial is probably still a ways out. And so the council has amended some of the permit parking programs that will allow, at least in the early days, some of those residents to use some of the street parking and not be subject to the time limits. And that's sort of the most embryonic way of how we're getting into the parking management
Right.
business.
But, what concerned me is, we haven't had but just a small portion of the people move into that area. And we already have used, and if you haven't driven by at night, I encourage you to do so. Because if all the parking spaces get taken by people that are living there now, we're not gonna have anybody that's gonna be able to have a business in there that'll be feasible. And I know there's other parking structures and things in the mill, but it's just something that I think we need to look at, and I thought this was a good time to bring it up, so.
No, you're right, and we'll be bringing a couple other projects forward to you in the next, few months in that area where we'll need to be looking at parking absolutely, in the current day, absolutely.
And I think that's an ongoing thing in that area that we have to look at from now on.
Yes, no, we are definitely, whether we like it or not, in the parking management business, these days. We have to be.
And on your spare time, you can go validate parking. It'll be great.
Fortunately, we have a transportation section.
There you go. Thank you.
I almost held you to that one comment that you had, but, kidding. Andrew?
Echoing the comments on a great product for the mobility element, I just had one question in regards to, or one comment, I should say, in regards to Goal 5 around 5.10, bike support facilities. I noticed that we make specific mention of requiring bike support facilities for new development or redevelopment projects, but I didn't see a statement anywhere in here that supports the addition of bike facilities in areas that aren't going to be new projects or redeveloped projects that may have a need for those facilities already.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Usually these things it's easy to get these things when you have a new project going forward or, a significant, remodel of it. Buildings that are just sort of staying as is, it's sometimes difficult to sort of compel folks to do that, but we'll look into that further about what ways we can maybe get to those type of buildings as well.
So just one, so in addition to just the support facilities in general, I'm thinking just even kind of the rest station areas, particularly along some of our existing trails and trails that we have planned in the Bike and Ped Master Plan. Areas for people to be able to stop, park their bike, picnic tables. You see it on the American River Trail with the fix-it stations for the bicycles. I know we have support facilities in here, and maybe I'm thinking about it in a different way, but I think that there needs to be some inclusion of consideration of those types of facilities as well.
I think that's a good point.
Thank you. Excellent work.
Do you want me to come back to you?
Sure.
Bernadette, any comments?
Oh, Brenda's got some comments. Of course she does. Yeah, thank you again to all the staff who've worked on this report, on this draft, I should say. I've had, as you're probably aware, this is something that's a very interesting topic to me. And just yesterday, we had a luncheon that featured several people who had some very interesting things to say about this very topic. So the first is just the term mobility. That sounded great to me, but it turns out that is actually falling out of vogue. And one of the things that I've been talking about with some of the folks who work at the state and SACOG is that the new terminology, again, with the changing focus from level of service to vehicle miles traveled, the shift has gone from what we were talking about, the connectivity or the circulation and mobility. They've actually said that accessibility and connectivity are two of the terms that they generally use, with the focus being on accessing where you're trying to go, whether you're talking about, running errands from your home, visitors, work, et cetera. Anyway, just putting that out there, different terminologies, and I promise that my feedback is going to get more substantive as we go. So then again, moving forward from level service to VMTs, I'm really thrilled to see how staff has embraced this, and I challenge us to go a step further. I've actually mentioned this to Charlene Hamilton as well. What I think that our city does very, very well is we don't just plan, we execute, and that's excellent. One of the things that I see is throughout the work that I do is that it's not just the planning or community development side, but we really need to engage fire, public works, public safety as part of this document. That when we are planning the width of our streets, or the sidewalks, or where we can put bike paths, we really need to look at what the limitations are when you actually get to executing development. If a master plan community cannot have very walkable streets because they need to have a road wide enough for a gigantic fire truck to fit through. It's going to change the quality of the walkability of our communities. So I encourage us, that may be something that's reflected in this general plan, or it may just be a comment to staff. I would really like to see that happen. I think it's going to increase the quality of our neighborhoods, not just so that we have urban walkable neighborhoods in places like the Washington District and the future Pioneer Bluffs area, but also so that as Southport continues to develop, we will see communities that people can feel safe walking and biking in. Another area, there's some references to connectivity with other jurisdictions, which I think is really important, but let's look at the multimodal approach as well. You know, West Capitol is a significant thoroughfare for bike traffic from Davis. I Street Bridge will be a significant thoroughfare for bike ped access to the rail yards, and I know that's a far way off, but so is this document. This document, we're going to be living with this document for several years, and that's when you're going to see that development happen. And so I'd like to see multimodal connectivity with adjacent jurisdictions being an important part of this particular general plan. There's a section in the staff report that references how in 2009, organizations like the BIA and the Chamber of Commerce had an opportunity to weigh in and provide feedback. I think it's equally important for us to actively reach out to some of the advocate groups, because they're not just advocates, they're experts. In particular, I think that Walk Sacramento and the Sacramento Area Bicycle Advocates would be excellent organizations to weigh in. They may have some insight into our general plan that would be really beneficial and make it a stronger plan in general. And then this is going to kind of get into the economic development component of it, but this mobility connectivity piece, it has to do with property values. Absolutely. I would venture to guess that just the paving of the Clarksburg rail line increased property values in that area. It makes it safer, right? There's better lighting, there's more foot traffic, but there's also such a wonderful amenity. So I think that as we talk about connectivity, there's that as far as a homeowner property value piece. But again, the connectivity is a big piece for us as a port and as a transportation city. So I don't know that necessarily that needs to be reflected in the general plan, but I appreciate that nod in the mobility element, and I'd like to continue to see that being echoed, if not in the general plan, in the dialogue that we're having around it. But thank you very much. I was pretty excited, and I've already been bragging to people about how awesome our city is when it comes to general planning.
Thank you, Bernadette. Alex?
I do. I want to echo everyone's comments about how progressive, forward-looking, and sustainable this document is. I love it. I have a couple of thoughts having to do mostly with walkability. And I notice in M6.3, we do use the phrase street trees, which is great. I would love for there to be somewhere in the document the use of the word canopy, because a tree is not a tree is not a tree, as I know you know. Across the river, the city of Sacramento is having a substantial controversy now over its tree ordinance revisions, or proposed tree ordinance revisions. And a lot of the controversy has to do with the fact that a tree is not a tree is not a tree, and that some trees may look nice from where you're standing at street level, but they don't provide much shade, really. So I don't know where it would go, but I'd love to see whether it's possible to draw attention to the need for a canopy and to actually use the word. And again, so I have another idea that I have no idea where it would go, but I would love for the city to take on a goal of having fill in the blank 90, 85, 95% of its children walking or biking to school every day. The walkability section is terrific. Maybe it needs to go in the introduction. Maybe there's somewhere else in the general plan where it could be stated as a goal of the city. But the average child walking to school every day avoids about a 5-pound-a-year weight gain. And that is a huge factor in the development of what used to be called adult onset diabetes, which unfortunately now is often childhood onset diabetes. Kids walking or biking to school is terribly important for their health. It will also continue to keep our feet to the fire with regard to air quality, which I know we're all focused on as well. On a little bit smaller scale than that, the last 15 years of my public health work was in injury prevention. And the phrase neighborhood electric vehicle makes me nervous. I know they're out there. I know they're being used. My family retired to Sun City, Arizona. And in those days, we didn't call them neighborhood electric vehicles. We called them golf carts. Because that's what they were. And I understand that the state of the art has improved quite a bit since then. So I'm not trying to state an opposition to neighborhood electric vehicles. And I don't know, I suppose I should find out, what the safety standards are for those things and what speeds and circumstances they're designed for. And therefore, would draw to a logical conclusion about what level of street they would be permitted on and what level they would not be permitted on. I'm sure that's too specific to be in a general plan document, and I don't know how soon we're going to get to that, so this is no emergency, but just want to state my nervousness about that.
Yeah, there are parameters for where NEVs can do, and it's based on the speed limit. I don't know what that is off the top of my head, but it's pretty low.
35 or something.
35 or less.
Yeah. That's all.
Parveen?
I just wanted to thank staff for preparing this draft, but I don't actually have any comments.
Okay. Martha?
David, excellent job on the background and the document. I just want to compliment you like all the other commissioners have done. Appreciated the background also on the two SBs, 375 and 743. Helped me to get some understanding on the guidance that this document provided for our city as we're coming into compliance with state laws, and actually doing a very good job at looking at how we are going to move forward in the future in implementing our mobility element. In looking at some specifics, I echo my fellow commissioners' comments here, and they referenced a few of the points that I was going to make as well, so I support what they have said on that. In looking at specifically, the M-5.9, the public bicycle parking facilities, Commissioner Stonefeld referenced M510 on bike support facilities. I wanted to also find a way to add some language in there to say that they're going to encourage existing businesses to add bicycle parking facilities. Just some way to, put some momentum in that with our general plan. And it may not need to be there, but I felt maybe it could be helpful if we do include it, because we do have a lot of buildings here that are a lot of folks are going to have access to, and we want to have some sort of equality all across the board with all of our businesses here. In M5.12, the bike safety for children, I thought that was a really nice recommendation there, and just wanted to point that out. In M67, safe pedestrian crossings, Commissioner Kelcher mentioned he wants all the kids, and I definitely agree and support that, to look at walking or bicycling to school. Some of my concerns have been, because I run a lot in Southport area, is safety. And I have seen kids darting, people are driving their kids to school, and others are walking, and others are bicycling. And the safety of those children, I've felt a little fearful to see that, things happen, and everybody's really busy and rushing in the morning. So to add something there to include safety near the schools, to try to reinforce some, methods to do that. Commissioner Austin referenced having to work with, to include public safety as far as police, working with the police and fire department. I also want to reinforce that message as we look at goods movement, page 215. As we look at transporting, whether it be in our railways, hazardous materials or things like that, that the city is going to work closely with our fire department and public safety folks. If we can include something like that, I think that would help me to feel that we have something in our general plan. And just one more point on the electric vehicle charging stations, that's M79. As we look forward to the future and we have them in place, having public transportation, some places are going to have it, some places are not. And I think having a centralized location for some of those to have public transportation to allow folks to branch out and to use other parts of our city through public transportation. I don't think we need to have anything specific there, but just thinking in the future as we move forward in that area. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, I have more than just a couple comments. So the first one is thanking staff. I think this is a great document. I think we're moving in the right direction, and I'm going to echo one of Bernadette's comments that the transition from level of service to vehicle miles traveled is going to have a huge positive effect on our community by shifting the focus from automobile and how long do you sit at a traffic light to what other modes of transportation can we encourage to move people around the city. This has been something that I've wanted to encourage for a while, and it's nice that it's being included in our CEQA document now. So I'm happy about that. I would like to note that the city is going to be in the spotlight once again in just a couple months as the Amgen Tour is traveling through our city. So bicyclists will be coming through, and I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on the city to showcase how we're supporting bicyclists. That said, I'm going to probably focus most of my comments on the bike section, where we talk about streets or routes as related to bicycles. I would also like to consider separate paths or bikeways, and I use those in quotes because we don't include those in most of the sections. For example, M-5.3, I'll have to get myself to that as well. Okay. I think we need more than 5 or 6 feet on the side of the road, and we should be encouraging separate paths where at all possible, especially in new development. And I would love to include them in older developments, but you can't add paths where there's already a building. And so that's why it's very important to consider these as we're considering new development. That's also echoed in M-2.2. So different sections in the document where we talk about routes. I would also like to encourage paths, separate paths. M5.7, coexistence. This one caused me to hesitate a little bit. I actually would like this one removed. And the reason is it's limiting us promoting alternative modes of transportation and continuing to prioritize vehicle traffic. Yeah, where available traffic volumes and speeds permit safe coexistence of bicycle and so in other words, well, it says it right there, limit designated and marked on-street bicycle routes to only safe streets, essentially. And I understand that there are probably unsafe routes here, but maybe we should be fixing that rather than continuing to promote streets. So I'm not sure if we can change that or eliminate that completely, but that one, I think, is contrary to most of the other document.
We can work on that one a little better.
Okay. I think, believe it or not, those are the big ones on my mobility. So I think I was taking notes, but we heard such a variety of comments over such a range of topics that I hope you took notes too.
Yes, I'm making notes on each section, and particularly from which commissioners, brought each item up and to digest this, and hopefully we're also being recorded tonight, so I can watch the tape a little bit too.
Right.
Chair, may I make one more comment?
Sure.
Sorry, something the Vice Chair said sparked a thought. On M7-9 electric vehicle charging stations, it's great. I'm fully supportive, obviously, of supporting that concept, but there's the city's also already been supportive of other advanced vehicle fueling technologies, and that is something that I did not see in this document anywhere. And so to the extent that we can include something about the city being supportive of future development of advanced fueling technologies, whether it be hydrogen or in 10 years from now, whatever we're fueling our vehicles with then. Thank you for letting me get in on the end.
Oh, that's quite all right. This is an open discussion. All right, so with that, if we have enough comments for you for mobility, maybe we can move on to the economic development elements.
Let's access and circulate into the economic development element at this time. This would be a new element in our general plan. We don't have anything currently like this. And we have done a lot of economic development activities, particularly over the last few years with the Port Business Plan, the Pioneer Bluff Transition Plan, and it was even before that, there were several sort of comprehensive economic development strategies, especially back in the redevelopment days. But those things were never sort of provided the foundation, that a general plan document, would. Those documents still live on and are important policy references. But our goal this time was to sort of, cement many of those as a general plan element and to be, clear and observe what our objectives are. Especially, we have the Food Hub initiative, which is, something that's been an ongoing initiative, will remain that way for many times. So our whole, as a planner, I'm definitely biased toward the general plan, but any of these other initiatives that may not necessarily be what you might commonly find in a general plan, there's absolutely nothing wrong with having them in a general plan and giving them that foundation, and then, being able to point to that as you fill out a grant application, things like that. So, as the general plan really becomes sort of the bedrock for all of our initiatives, and so economic development is obviously one of those very important initiatives. So this element is relatively short. We sort of, boiled it down as sort of 5 general areas. And, many of these are things that we have been doing all along, but now they'll have sort of the foundation in the general plan. It's just this sort of leads off about how we want to just, maintain that we want to have an economic development program. And this is something we've actually got a little bit of head start on because, we have a whole economic development division in the city manager's office, which we have not always had over the years. And part of where it's leaded toward this is that they did prepare a few years ago the sort of comprehensive economic development strategy for the city. And so now we'll sort of nest that objective in here, but then still allow those documents to sort of proceed and live on and, have this relationship back to the general plan, but not necessarily be in the general plan. That's sort of what we're striving for on some of these other more strategic initiatives. So it goes into overall sort of general economic development, goals, strategies, and objectives. And then gets into a little more detail in the remaining goals, where we get into how we're going to do infrastructure investment. It's a very important objective of us, since something we always did in the redevelopment days and will maintain doing in the post-redevelopment era, and trying to invest in, hopefully catalytic infrastructure. And then going into how we will finance a lot of those things. We're very much pushing the infrastructure financing districts, and nowadays the enhanced infrastructure financing districts we're already working on. We clearly are, looking to, make a lot of improvements in some of our business areas. We recognize that some of those areas are aging. They may need some revitalization. Breweries are helping really good with that, but there may be other activities that we want to incorporate in our aging industrial stock, and trying overall to maintain our economic base in our community. We are fortunate to have a very strong economic base here, and we do want to maintain that. We have a lot of other things about business attraction and retention. These are things that we do every day. Trying to work with our business community to improve our business climate. And recognizing that the businesses are part of our community, just as our residents are. And then speaking on our residents, what's very important for us is to develop our workforce in our community. Our population is growing, substantially, but we still maintain a large wage and employment gap in many of our parts of our community. So developing our own local workforce is a very important goal. Not only is it good for our business community, it's good for our community as a whole. So we have several goals and policies toward that long. And of course, lastly, retail is a very important part of our economy. We want to have those goods and services available right here in our community, so that people don't need to leave our community to get there. And so we have several policies specifically related to retail development. These obviously are things that generate tax revenues. But all this sort of relates back to everything that we can do here locally. It helps achieve some of our other goals of, reducing vehicle miles traveled, being able to walk places, healthy communities. All of it's sort of interrelated, and which works out well, because part of our overall objective here, the general plan, is that, it does need to be internally consistent. So some of these themes that are sort of emerging, you can see there's some overlap between some of the various elements in the general plan, and that's in part by design, because many of these goals do sort of overlap a couple of different policy and objectives. So we're confident in the end, when we put the entire policy document together with the 7 or 8 elements that it'll have, that you will see that internal consistency and themes carried through. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about our economic development element.
Thank you, David. Given Commissioner Sturmfeld's background and previous position on EDEC, I'm going to ask that he start our discussion.
Thank you. And I have the additional benefit of hearing this item on EDEC still in an earlier draft. The document's been developed significantly since that point, so I actually have several comments that I would like to share. The first one is in relation to ED 1.7, the next economy. I would strongly recommend that we consider removing this item from the plan. The next economy movement, in my opinion, has sputtered. The leadership that was pushing it doesn't appear to be leading it in the same way. And there may be folks who have a different opinion on that, and I'm completely open to that. But as I get looks from down the lane. That being said, it had a lot of movement early on. It came to EDAC several times. We approved several documents and sent documents to council saying we were in support of it, and very little happened, and that was over 2 years ago. Their website hasn't been updated in 2 years. I just think for a document that's going to be living for 10 years, putting them in here, I don't feel comfortable enough in where it's going at this point. So I'll get off the horse on that one. The second item I'd like to comment on is ED 2.15, the broadband internet expansion. And I believe I brought this up last time. I'm still not incredibly pleased with the language. I think it's fairly weak, and I know this is a general plan, but I would like to see the language be a little bit stronger about how the city will work, not just to improve, not just with broadband internet service providers, but what policies the city will implement to ensure that we have not just adequate, but forward-thinking internet access citywide. We've got 100 gigabyte cities and other cities across the country, and some of us and some of our businesses are struggling to get enough to video conference with their home office. So I really think we need to have a stronger stance on this and come out a little more forward-thinking, and whether that means adopting policies and saying that the city will adopt policies to improve broadband connectivity or something different. I'm open to what it says, but I just think it needs to be stronger. The third item, and this is really a philosophical challenge I'm having about specifically calling out retail development in the plan, not because I don't support any of the actual individual items in there, but because from an economic development perspective, if you do everything else right, the retail should come. And so if you're doing the land use right, if you have the population base to support the retail, if you're promoting small businesses, if you're making it easy to do business in the city and you have the right land use mix and zoning and all those things, attracting retail shouldn't be difficult. And I think a large reason why the city struggled with retail growth is because a lot of the population base that we were planning for didn't matriculate in the downturn. And so I think a lot of this will happen anyway. And given that this portion of the plan only focuses on 5 items, to make that one of them, to me, it just doesn't meet the muster of the other 4 categories that are focused on in the plan. So I'm not saying I don't agree with the concepts. I just think that given our limited economic development staff resources, that I'd rather them focus 98% of their time on the other 4, and this just be something that's important but not so specifically called out.
Yeah, some of this could probably be subsumed into the land use element too, and not necessarily have to be its own section here.
And then my last item, and I'm happy to beat up Aaron over this one too, but on the back page, the implementation programs, number 2, I am all for the city knowing as much as they possibly can about what properties and parcels are available, but I also don't think the city is a real estate agent or broker in terms of a full-time role, and I'm not sure that we have the capacity in order to do this. I know we developed the website for businesses to look and see available properties, but in the reality, properties come on and off the market every day, and the best place to get this source of information is by the city developing relationships with the property brokers and the real estate agency in the area and the owners of those existing owners, so that they can know who to call when an opportunity comes up, as opposed to spending all this time tracking the sale and resale of a property or the transfer of a property. It just seems like it may be an inefficient use of staff time when there's already folks in the industry that they could spend a portion of their time connecting with and building relationships with and get the same result. And then I would like to ask consideration for 3 additional items that I didn't really feel were focused on in this section that I think are important. The first would be supporting local entrepreneurs and supporting entrepreneurship within the community. I didn't feel like that was a theme that was touched on in this section. The second, and I think is critically important, is the city supporting the growth of existing businesses. And while I know we all support that, I didn't see it specifically called out in the plan anywhere, and so I'd just like to see if there's a way we can incorporate that. And then finally, I think there's an opportunity to focus on the great work the city's already done and has already committed to doing around making it easy to do business in the city. And I think there might be an area to add something around permitting efficiency for businesses, and particularly the use of technology or the city's interest in adopting technology to make it easier to do business with the city when you're a business coming to West Sacramento. So I'm happy to chat more in another setting about that. I know that was a lot, but.
Oh, absolutely, and you mentioned beating up Aaron. A lot of this is his work, so we can work on it together.
Hey, this isn't, don't let all my comments take away from the fact that he did an excellent job, and this is the first time we've done this, so I think it's definitely in the right place, but given my experience and having seen this before, there's a lot of things that kind of came to mind the second time around.
No, your input is very valuable. I do recall we did go to EDAC, and you were there at that time, and we continue to try to refine this. And we got some input from council already on some of these items, and so we're trying to, cull it all together and, get there. But I think a lot of your input now is good, and some of these initiatives, like broadband, for example, has already been a lot of progress on that, because we're working on broadband, specifically right now, sort of on a regional basis. And it's one of those goals also that's good to work on, because it crosses many of these other themes. It's good for business, but it's also good for communities, just, people that make sure they have access to broadband, because so many services are delivered that way, these days. And so I think we do want to work on that particular section in the light of some of the more very recent initiatives that we've been already going on.
And not to stress the point, but I want to make sure that we're being aggressive in the targets that were set, or the goal that we're setting for broadband infrastructure in the community. I don't want to be the city that's just doing as well as everyone else is. I want to be one of those cities that has high speed, and I mean very high speed internet everywhere in the community, especially the business community, the schools, health facilities, the city's facilities, and obviously access residentially as well.
Yeah, one of the things we're working on is when we build new roads, or we do major rehab on roads, that we'll put conduit in to those roads, and then we can sell that, frankly, to the providers out there. It's a good way to get multiple providers, into the community, which is good as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Charlie?
I know.
I let him go first because I knew he was going to have the most amount of comments.
Are so, I was, a couple of these I wanted to talk about anyway, but one, you talked about the real estate at the end. We've always used to, in this city, have a rotating broker list. So when somebody called about property, they go, oh, it's, Joe's turn. So you might remind them that there used to be a rotating brokers list. There still may be.
Yeah, what this is all about in the real world is people ask us all the time when they come to do a business here, what properties are available. So, it helps us to have some idea of what's out there, rather than to say, well, just go call a broker. It's part of how we can maybe put a prospective business with a broker together to go find a
But it
property.
takes you out of the real estate business and puts in the people that do it for a living. And if you rotate it, it's halfway fair. So that was, just a comment from what you had said. Somehow in here, we talk about the positive things that we do in the city. And I think, again, I'm kind of echoing something you said, but my comment was, we have people out there that do things for the city. And I don't know who does it now, but we had like Bill Summers in the fire department. He went to every business in the city. He walked through the business. This guy was a genius. He knew that if you had a can of this in one shelf and something else next to it, it would explode. He knew those things would go together. He was the biggest asset the city had, because he didn't charge you 5 cents to come in there. He would tell you what was good and bad in your business and what you needed to do to correct it, and he would expect you to correct it and leave. But it was an asset that the city provided to the community. And we probably got other things out there too, that we could kind of tell people about. I don't know how we would do that. Well, we need to promote the good things that we do and how we promote businesses, and that's what that does. And I'll turn on my mic so, but the other one that really caught my eye, and the one that caught my eye the most, is we were talking about how you promote West Sacramento and you promote businesses buying from businesses. And we talked about all those things, and the one thing that I don't see mentioned in here is how the city should try to promote businesses here and buy locally if we can buy locally. And I don't know quite how you do that, but we had it in years past, and it kind of comes and goes. But one of the things I think we should do is try to promote, and I was looking at local purchasing as the section I circled and talked about. It said we shall encourage residents and businesses to shop locally, but we should probably suggest maybe that the city try to do the same thing. So when you have a good business here in town and you need to buy paper from them, we should try to buy it from them. And if you have a service available, you know, I know we try to do that, but we need to try to promote it even more. And it's hard to ask other people. I try to buy locally whenever I possibly can. And that's great. But, you know, it's got to be everybody. It's got to be the city, the businesses, and the residents all staying locally. And we provided so many opportunities today, and many of you weren't here when you couldn't go out and buy it. We had the Jean Depot was the only place you could buy a pair of pants in this whole town, and you didn't have anywhere to go. You know, you had one store that sold clothing. Well, we have a few places now. You got a nice Target that you can go to. And, you know, you have opportunities, and that's what we need to promote. We need to promote it as much as we can for the businesses and the residents. But I think there should be something in there about the city, and I don't know quite how you do that. I'm not as fancy as someone ahead of me, but that's my comments. Thank you.
Jump over to this end.
Skipping over Martha?
I will make a habit of that too, actually.
That's cute. Like you put all the talkative people at the top of this. Yes, thank you again for, I guess, thank Aaron for putting together this new section in the general plan. I appreciate the comments that have come before me. And just to build upon that, one of the things that I saw, and I do think that maybe we take out this retail section and we add in, again, more of an entrepreneurship supporting local small business section. You know, we're all talking about the barn these days, and I think that events is a really significant component of potential economic development. I'd like to see something in there. This may be something that will go along with Commissioner Sternfeld's recommendation about permitting, but permitting, facility usage, streets, you know, all those good things that go along with putting on events. I'd like to see something come together that is clear, concise, and streamlined, so that, you know, a small community group could say, hey, you know, my church group wants to shut down this street and have a great street fair. Or a major production firm could come in and shut down the, you know, pretty much the entire bridge district for a major significant event with tens of thousands of people. I would like there to be something that is, again, clear, concise, and streamlined. I also want to echo what we were saying before. Some of the things that I really appreciated in this element were PBIDs, IFDs, and I appreciate their comment about workforce development. We have to develop on all fronts. In my mind, an IFD would develop from the district up. PBEDs would really develop from the businesses up, and workforce development would develop from the people level up. And I think that might be something that could work pretty well together in an additional item in the economic development plan. And my first note on here, I just wanted to say, my first note on here was defer to EDAC. So again, I appreciate Commissioner Sternfeld's weighing in. And I think it really underscores that I think that our commission has a really great mix of knowledge about legacy, health, economic development, land use. I think we're a really good team. So anyway, those are my comments.
Alex?
Thank you. And Dave, thank you for bringing this to us in the first place. With your indulgence, I want to tell a very short story that I thought of when I read ED 1.12 about quality of life. It's not a long story. It's about San Antonio. A number of years ago at a New Partners for Smart Growth conference, I heard a talk by a former supervisor, a county supervisor, who was talking about the race they were in to land a new Toyota plant. And all the pushing and shoving you have to do. They made it down to the final two, and it was between them and someplace in Tennessee. And they didn't hear, and they didn't hear, and then they did hear. Tennessee got it. Sometime later, she managed to buttonhole one of the Toyota executives and asked him what happened. And he said the most amazing thing. They noticed that San Antonio had the highest prevalence of childhood obesity in the state. And when they penciled out their health care costs for their workers, the factory didn't pencil out, and they went to Tennessee. Long-winded way of saying, it's not just quality of life, it's public health. And I know the city doesn't have a health department, but the reason I wanted to be here on the Planning Commission is because in perhaps all cities, this is the public health department. Hospitals and doctors, 90% of what they do doesn't really contribute to health status. It treats illnesses. But the things that the city does and the things that we review here, like walkability and shade and bicycle safety and the like, where people live and how much air emissions their cars have to spew out because they have to drive everywhere. These are the things that really create a healthy community that an employer can look at and say, I can move here. My healthcare costs are not going to destroy my business model like they might in some other places. I don't know how to say this in here, in the intro or in quality of life or wherever, and I'm sure there are things throughout the general plan where this would apply. But when I read that quality of life section, it spoke to me. So I would ask if there's any way you can integrate concepts of health and public health into a discussion about quality of life and how it's important to economic development. That's all I have.
Can I ask a question? Is there going to be a health element in?
Yeah, we have a whole healthy communities element. That's sort of the next big one that I want to roll out, as soon as I can. And I think that we'll have a robust discussion there with perhaps
Yes, we will.
Commissioner Kelter leading that one. But I like what I'm hearing tonight about how a lot of these things are interrelated. And the story you just told about the Toyota plant was actually, I'm really glad you brought that up, because that's a very meaningful and real world thing we have to deal with. We want to be competitive for businesses. There's a lot of things we have to do. We talk about the workforce development and everything, but I imagine many companies are doing that type of arithmetic these days when they're looking to site major facilities.
Irene?
I also really appreciate the work that went into creating this document. And I agree with Commissioner Austin's comment that we have such a great background on this commission. We really do. This deals a little bit more with my background. So I was actually really happy to see the section regarding business climate as well as workforce development. There are a lot of really great elements in here. What I think can be improved is I feel like there wasn't any sort of a connection between the two. Of course, people live in West Sacramento and work in other cities, and other people who live in Sacramento come and work in West Sacramento, and I understand that. But I think that this might be a good opportunity to connect the two between encouraging our workforce to work in our local businesses. It also kind of connects with Commissioner Austin as well as Commissioner Sternfeld were saying about the entrepreneurship. So that was something I thought could be improved. I feel like it was addressed in the workforce development, in section 4.10 with transfer programs. So this dealt with on-the-job training opportunities, so I thought that was great. In 4.9 workforce development programs, but I thought maybe we could include something in the business climate section as well. Just encouraging employment of our local citizens. And then the other thing I wanted to recommend was an addition of some sort of comment about how I just kind of want to throw in the term equal opportunity employers. I think that we have a really diverse population here, and just looking at our commission alone, people from a variety of backgrounds and ages, and I think that would be a great addition. So I'm not quite sure where it would go, somewhere within the business climate, and maybe also on the workforce development end of this. Let me see if I had anything else. Yeah, and I would just echo Commissioner Austin and Sternfeld's comments regarding a section about entrepreneurship and the growth of existing businesses.
Thank you. Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate all the comments that my fellow commissioners have provided. It provided me with more, thoughts. As I'm looking at everybody's background, we do have a very diverse group of commissioners who bring in a wealth of experience and insight on what we can do to improve, where we're going in the future. And gosh, it's really exciting. I cannot tell you. I feel really energized after, hearing everybody's discussion. And, we're all like, we're going to make this happen, yeah. In thinking about the comments that have been provided, first of all, looking at the table in the back, one question I had on number 2, just asking, the city asking themselves, could that list be outdated at any point in time where somebody calls, where rotating it with the broker or having a relationship with the broker be an alternative? And, it's just a thought that I had, considering that, there can be a lot of changes that could happen at any given point. But I appreciate that the city is trying to extend a service to interested future business owners. And I understand the rationale behind that and appreciate, where they're going with that. In looking at other economic development implementation programs, our universal preschool for West Sac program, I think, is pretty key for getting our families to go to work. And I can't imagine, I'm in the legislature, hearing about how families cannot get to work because we lack childcare. And, as a community, if we don't have it, I can't see how some of these things can possibly happen. And working together with that, we have that, within our city. So working together with that unit, I think, would be very helpful in providing resources to our future workforce as we're helping them, get trained and educated, and giving them hope that, once you're ready to move, we got support for you and your family. And it's quality education. Also, I, coming from local government background, am familiar with what county government can provide, and with the direction that our Workforce Investment Act, as it's been reauthorized, and there's discussion about what the county can do, and working with our adult education, city college partners, and I'd like to see that our city's plugged in some way as we prepare for that in the future. And that's going to be, years on out. And so maybe providing, I know we have workforce agencies, but I'd like to see more specifics with that in thinking about, as we talk about stories, and thinking about our homeless project. I saw how the city did an excellent job on getting a number of people off the streets, and that couldn't have happened if we didn't work closely with our county folks and our housing people. And so I really think that being specific in our document in saying that we're going to work with the county. That'll help us to be held accountable with what's happening in working with our county in the future. And I think our county's interested in working with us on programs like, CalWorks, for example. It provides public benefits, but it also provides subsidized employment. And if we informed future business owners that you can have an employee who's trained and their salary can be subsidized, through the CalWorks program, they may be interested, because we have a program like that, and we can articulate that, and we're knowledgeable. And also looking at providing support for our workers, we include an element somewhere in educating our future workforce about transportation. Because in the CalWorks program, transportation can be provided if they work. And that's something that all counties are struggling with, I think, is providing information on transportation. So maybe working together with our business owners in helping to have our employees make it to work, whether it be through public transportation or private transportation, whatever it may be that they need to accomplish. One of the groups in our city that I've seen the city do a tremendous job working with is our Chamber of Commerce. And so it's referencing them in this document. I think they've somewhere, whether it be through public input, because that is a successful group that has done a good job in helping for them to be educated on any changes that's going on in the city. Our city does outreach to them and does a lot of good projects together with them, with our residents, and some annual programs that we have. So including them in this document, I think, would be helpful. Another sector of our workforce is our high school. And I'd like to see how we can include some language to include our high school students in getting engaged in our workforce in the future as well. And that would, could be included in the ED4 section possibly, as we take a look at adding something in there, maybe above higher education or something. And that would be about it.
Thank you, Commissioner Guerrero. With that, I'm going to close the public workshop. And I have just two comments. First one, to the commission, I'm just so encouraged by the comments that I've heard this evening, and I think they paint a beautiful picture of what the city has become. So thank you. Thank you, staff, too, for this wonderful element. I'm hung up on the land use versus retail discussion just a little bit. And the reason that I wanted to bring this back up, I can see where we would want to move retail into land use, and if you build it, it will come. I believe it remains a high priority for community members to attract more retail, and that's why we might want to continue to consider it as a priority. Also, in addition to just zoning for it, it's what type of retail do we want? We want that active retail where it attracts individuals to be out walking and active shopping. And I think some of our elements in here, like neighborhood retail 5.3, is just a little bit vague. And perhaps we can be a little bit more proactive on what we want to see as far as active shopping centers. In other words, not necessarily, well, not strip malls, but something like a Santana Row. And I think we're moving in that direction, but we might be able to clarify and be a little bit more specific. That is it for my comments.
Yeah, I'd like to thank the commission tonight. I thought this was a very good and robust discussion, and I appreciate the input from the various perspectives that are represented here on the commission tonight. So we have a little bit of homework to do, but that's sort of what we expected. We're going to go to a couple of the other commissions, over the, probably, next month, some of the new commissions, and get some input from those new members to our citizen commissions. So again, thank you very much for tonight's input. This was very good.
Thank you. I hope your pen still has ink after all of that. With that, I'll move to informal discussion. Motion to accept. Thank you.